Hello students. So today let us study about the social contract theory. The social contract theory is a theory about the origin of the state. So now let us first study the evolution, how the social contract theory evolved. The social contract theory is not only the primitive theory but is also well known of all the theories pertaining to the state, and it has had tremendous impact on the history of political thought. So the social contract theory can be dated back to the Greek city-states, and a proof to this or an evidence to this can be stated in Plato's work De Crito, where Plato writes about Socrates waiting for execution, though he considered it to be unjust, to show loyalty towards the state. And in another work of Plato, you can see in his Republic, Plato has made a mention about the agreements between men. As far as the concept of contract is concerned, it was well known in Roman law that we could see this in feudalism, and Kautilya also makes a mention in his Arthashastra about the formation of the state, where the citizens decided to give 1/6 of the grains produced by them and 1/10 of their produce to the ruler, in return for the ruler shouldering the responsibility of maintaining safety and security of the citizens. And during the Middle Age or the medieval times, Thomas Aquinas, the famous political philosopher, he is of the opinion that the ruler has entered into an agreement with his subjects to uphold the welfare of the people, and in case if he fails to keep up the expectations of the people, he would no more claim obedience from them. The work of Hobbes, Locke, and all these, the examples which I gave you about whether it is in the ancient times, Plato in his work, or as far as Kautilya's Arthashastra is concerned, and then Thomas Aquinas' opinion about regarding the origin of the state. So all these throw light, about the origin of the state or the evolution of the social contract theory. So as far as the social contract theory is concerned, the work of Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, occupies a very significant place in the history of political thought. So whether it is Plato's Republic or Crito, or whether it is the opinion given by Thomas Aquinas or Kautilya's Arthashastra, all these throw an important light as to the concept of contract, how the people entered into the contract with their subjects. Let us now study the social contract theory of Hobbes. So before I could just start with the state of human nature, according to Hobbes, let me just tell you something about Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes was born in 1588, and he was born during the Great Rebellion and the Commonwealth. The Civil War of England, had a profound influence on the life of Hobbes, and Hobbes was of the opinion that England could be saved from anarchy only through absolute monarchy, which this is also reflected in his social contract theory, and he justified the rule of the Stuart kings and defended their absolute powers. So now let us study the state of human nature. State of human nature refers to wherein Thomas Hobbes describes the nature of man. That is, how man was. How man was, what was his character, and how was his behavior. So this is what you call it as the state of nature. So now according to Hobbes, man in the state of nature was selfish and self-seeking. So he was selfish and self-seeking. He was selfish and self-seeking in the sense, he was not, bothered about others. He was least bothered about others, and he was always, worried about himself at the cost of common good. And the purpose, Thomas Hobbes says that the purpose behind all the human actions, that is, what had happened in the state of nature, what man has done in the state of nature, was, backed by his desire to satisfy all his wants. So his wants, his desires, his aspiration, are, the reasons, for him, taking out, for him, for being such a person in the state of nature. And further Hobbes says that man was a social animal and that he was surrounded by sorrow and agony when amongst his fellow beings. So man is a social. So according to Hobbes, he says that though man when man was along with his fellow beings, when man was among his fellow beings, he wasn't happy, but he was in sorrow and he was in pain, he was in agony. And further Hobbes says that the state of nature was a state of war. So the state of nature was a state of war, and it was a war of each against all, and it was occupied by unceasing terror, and there was threats to man's life. And Hobbes further says that the life of man was nasty, brutish and short-lived, and man's life was marked by cynicism and apprehension. So therefore you can just see that whatever Thomas Hobbes says, how man was in the state of nature, you can say that it's kind of a pessimistic view, which Thomas Hobbes gives us about the state of nature. So now next let us see features of Hobbes' theory, features of Hobbes' social contract theory. So Hobbes, he preferred monarchy. So first and the foremost feature of the social contract theory is the supremacy of the monarch. So Thomas Hobbes, he preferred monarchy, he was in favor of monarchy. And according to Thomas Hobbes, the sovereign was all powerful. So all powerful in the sense, the king possessed the right to declare war and to conclude peace. So he was the sole person, who would, decide about all these things, and that the people had no say. Not only this, the king also enjoyed the power of choosing his counselors, ministers, officers, magistrates, all those that were required both in times of war and peace. Only the king had the right to choose all these people, people that were necessary in terms of war and peace. And further, Hobbes opined that sovereignty was indivisible and inalienable. Secondly, the second most important feature of social contract theory is sovereign not a party to the contract. So sovereign not a party to the contract in the sense, the people on their own, according to Hobbes, have sacrificed their right to rule themselves to the sovereign. And this sovereign is an outcome of a contract. So which means that the people have come forward and they by themselves have agreed to give up their right, sacrifice their right, to rule themselves, and they have given the right to rule them to the sovereign, and hence, sovereign is not a party to the contract. Further, Hobbes says that the people cannot withdraw from the contract for the purpose of defending themselves. So which means that the main idea or the main intention or the main purpose behind this entering into a contract was, their protection. That is, was their protection, as I told you, in the state of nature, that, there was terror in the state of nature and there was threat to the life of the people. So since the purpose is, the main purpose behind entering into a contract is the protection of the people, the people will not withdraw the contract. So if the people withdraw the contract, it will be that their, life will be in danger. So security was the most important factor. In order to ensure security, the people had entered into the contract. So this is the second one, that sovereign not a party to the contract. So thirdly, Hobbes says that law is the command of the sovereign. So command of the sovereign in the sense, the sovereignty cannot be divided, and the sovereign possesses the right to dispense justice and decide the mutual disputes. And it means that the sovereign or the king is the main source of law, and his commands are laws. So which means that the people have to obey the king. Whatever the king says, the people needs to obey, which means that the words of the king has an effect of law. So the people cannot disobey the king. Then further, Hobbes says that people renounce their rights to sovereign. So people renounce their rights to sovereign, that is, they have sacrificed their rights for the sake of the sovereign, for this in order to ensure their security, in order to ensure their protection. And further, Hobbes says that the people could enjoy only those rights, or they are permitted to do only those things that were decided by the king. And further, finally, Hobbes says that people cannot rebel against the sovereign. So it is crystal clear from all the features I told you just few minutes ago that, where the king's words have the effect of law, and where the king takes all important decisions and he decides who is to be, appointed and who is required for concluding the peace or war. So it is obvious from all the above that, the people cannot rebel against the sovereign. So you can say that Thomas Hobbes dispossessed people's right to rebel against the king. See, to the extent, to what extent Thomas Hobbes has given the right to the sovereign or the power to the sovereign is that even if the king was arbitrary and despotic, or in other words, even if the king is bad, even if the king is not ruling according to the expectations of the people, or in other words, if the people dislike the king because of his behavior or whatever it is, even then, the people had no right to rebel the king. So, to quote Thomas Hobbes, whatsoever sovereign doth is unperishable by the subject, which means that whatever the king does, whether, even if it is bad, even if it is something which the people don't like, the people has no right to question it. So this is what, the Hobbes says, that people cannot rebel against the sovereign. So now let us critically evaluate Thomas Hobbes' theory. So I hope you all have understood by now what is about the social contract theory of Hobbes, and we can just read point to point, understand point to point, and then critically evaluate, what are the negative aspects as far as the social contract theory of Hobbes is concerned. So firstly, you can say that the state of nature is skeptical. So obviously, I told you that the state of nature, as given by Thomas Hobbes, you can say the Hobbes have drawn a gloomy picture of the state of nature. So gloomy picture of the state of nature is, he is pessimistic, about man in the state of nature. When Thomas Hobbes says that, man was selfish, man is self-seeking, and, the main reason why he has done all this is just because to satisfy his wants. And he moreover says that man as a social animal, even though he is among or with his fellow beings or with his companions, he is always in pain, he is always in agony, he is always in sorrow. And he also talks about war, he also talks about lawlessness. So all these, gives, all these, we can just come to a conclusion that, whatever Hobbes, has given us a picture of his, the state of nature is very gloomy, and which means that it is very skeptical. It is not, there are no positive aspects, or he is not optimistic about the nature of, optimistic about how man lived in the state of nature. So, the critics criticize Thomas Hobbes, for having created a social contract through the state of nature. So this is what we have learned, that, because of the state of nature, how man was and how he behaved in the state of nature, and due to this, man felt that, he was insecure, and there was threat to his life because there was terror in the state of nature, and it is due to this, they entered into a contract. So this is what Thomas Hobbes says. But critics says that creating a social contract through the state of nature, is something, which is something vague, which Thomas Hobbes has told about. And according to critics, they say that in this state of nature, no contracts were possible because, there was no sovereign to enforce them. Further, the critics say that, the contract is undemocratic. See, obviously, what have we learned about in the social contract theory of Hobbes is that, the sovereign of Hobbes is the representative of the people. I told you how the people enter into a contract, to ensure their security, to ensure their protection. They enter into the contract, by giving up their rights. But, when Thomas Hobbes tells us that the king or the sovereign is the representative of the people, critics say that there was no guarantee that, the king would represent them. that the king would represent them in the sense, that the king would take people's opinion into consideration in promoting their welfare. Because whatever, because that the Thomas Hobbes has given, supreme power to the sovereign, supreme power to the king, absolute power and unlimited power to the king. And I also told you just few minutes back how, the people have sacrificed their rights, to rule themselves to the sovereign, and they do not have any right to rebel the king, and they could enjoy only those rights, that were, and enjoy those rights and were permitted to do those things only that were decided by the king. So all this shows that, it is undemocratic, because whenever we talk about a democratic country as we have in India, we see that, the people's opinion is counted, the people's opinion are counted, the people's views are heard, the people have a say. But this is not so as far as the social contract theory of Hobbes is concerned. And absolute monarchy, the third, how can we critically evaluate Thomas Hobbes? The critics say that, the sovereign in the in the social contract theory of Hobbes, enjoys unlimited power, and this is obviously against democracy. In a democracy, we do not talk about, the king, or the prime minister, enjoying the unlimited power, but the power rests in the hands of the people. So when Hobbes, in his social contract theory, delegates unlimited power to the king, so which means that it is, against democracy. And the people, I just now told you a few minutes back, that the people can enjoy and are permitted to do only those things that are decided by the people. So what happens is here, here that, Thomas Hobbes has again overlooked the concept of popular sovereignty in the social contract in his theory. So he has overlooked the concept of popular sovereignty in the sense he has ignored popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty in the sense, you can say that popular sovereignty means, the people are given very less rights. In the sense, the people say is not counted. So, the people's views are not counted, and moreover, the critics say that, Hobbes' theory explains, only the concept of legal sovereignty, and he ignores the concept of political sovereignty. So here, the critics try to make it clear that political sovereign, is at the back of the legal sovereign and superior to it. So the king is not completely independent of people, who retain the ultimate power to change and replace the king if he fails to perform the functions assigned to him. So this is what the critics opine. Because Thomas Hobbes says, that the people have no right to rebel the king, even though he is despotic, even though he is bad, even though he is tyrannical. So, this is about the social contract theory of Hobbes. Okay, now let us study the social contract theory of Locke. So first let us see the state of nature, the state of human nature. So now hope you all have understood about the state of nature or the human nature, about Thomas Hobbes, or what Thomas Hobbes had to say about the state of nature. So whatever John Locke says, it's completely, it's different, from what Hobbes says. So John Locke considered human beings as decent, unlike quarrelsome, selfish and competitive creatures of Hobbes. So you can just see, that Thomas Hobbes had given us a gloomy picture of the state of nature, or he was very much skeptical about the state of nature. But now we can see what Locke tells us is that he considers human beings as very decent, and according to Locke, he gives us the reason. See what Locke says, what Thomas Hobbes tells us, that the main purpose or the main intention behind the actions of human beings is the desire of man. So now what Locke says that desire is the main cause of all the human actions, and the feeling of happiness arises out of satisfaction. So whatever Hobbes tells us that desire, aspirations, is the main purpose, behind all the human actions. So similarly, Locke also tells us that desire is the main cause of all human actions. And further, Locke says that, the feeling of happiness, arises out of satisfaction. So whenever our desires, our demands, our needs, and our aspirations are met, then, we feel satisfied and we feel happy. John Locke, he believed in the goodness of human nature. So unlike Hobbes, John Locke believed in the goodness of human nature. According to him, men are basically decent, they are orderly, and they are peace-loving, and they are capable of ruling themselves, and they are rational and social. So from this, it should be clear to us, the difference between, the picture, the gloomy picture of the state of nature that Thomas Hobbes gives us, and the optimistic, view of John Locke as far as the state of human nature is concerned. So Lord Locke says, that people are very decent, people are very orderly, organized, and they are peace-loving people. See, Hobbes says that, there was warlike situation in the state of nature. But, Locke says that the people are peace-loving there, and they are capable of ruling themselves, and they were rational and they were social. So further, Locke says that, people lived in society in the state of nature, and they enjoyed rights and liberties. So what kind of a state of nature, John Locke gives us is that, people enjoyed rights, people enjoyed freedom, or people enjoyed liberty, and, that people, and that, there was equality, there was freedom, and Locke says that, the state of nature was not occupied by war, unlike Hobbes, but he says it was one of inconvenience. So there was inconvenience in the state of nature, but it was not war. So further, Locke gives us the reason why there was inconvenience, in the state of nature, was that because there was the need of an established and known law. So there was lack of an established and known law. So this was, because of this, there was inconvenience in the state of nature. And further, Locke says that, the law of nature was given individual interpretation by every individual. So as far as the law of nature is concerned, each individual, interpreted in its own way. So there was, lack of a judge, who could give authoritative interpretation of law of nature. So, there was a lack of judge who could give authoritative interpretation of law of nature. So this was the main reason, why there was inconvenience in the state of nature according to John Locke. So now let us see the social contract of John Locke. So John Locke, talks about two types of contract. One is the social contract and the other is the governmental contract. Now let us see what is social contract, or what John Locke has to say about the social contract. So John Locke says that, the social contract leads to the formation of society. So, when man enters, I told you that, Locke says that, there was inconvenience, in the state of nature, and as a result of which, a social contract is entered, and I also told you the reason what Locke says, why there is inconvenience in the state of nature. So he says that, the social contract, leads to the formation of society, and then it puts an end to the state of nature. So whatever state of nature was there, like, how there was inconvenience in the state of nature, when as soon as the social contract is entered into, the state of nature comes to an end. And he says that, society is organized, after the state of nature comes to an end, for protecting human life, one thing, and secondly, to safeguard the property and freedom of the people. So for this purpose, a contract is entered into. I shall repeat that: to protect human life and to safeguard property and freedom of the people. So unlike Hobbes, John Locke says that, in this social contract, people don't renounce or sacrifice all their rights. So what was that they sacrifice or they give up or they renounce was the right to health, liberty and possession. So anybody, who disobeys, they will be punished with the society, and the society transfers, some of its power to a selected few who forms the government. So this is how the social contract is entered into, and when the power the society transfers some of its power to the selected few people who form the government. And so here starts the governmental contract. So what is the governmental contract now? So after the first contract was entered, the people enter into another contract, and that is namely the governmental contract. So what is this governmental contract is that under this contract the people are entrusted, the people entrust the government to legislate any agreement with the law of nature, and that is the people delegate the power to the government. The people delegate the power to the government to legislate any agreement with the law of nature, to decide any disputes and to enforce laws. And unlike Thomas Hobbes, the government becomes the party to the contract, and it is bound by the conditions of the contract. So sovereignty belonged to the people, who had the power to dismiss the government, in the sense, if the government went against their wishes, or the government is not up to the expectations of the people, then the people have every right to dismiss the government or to bring down the government. So this is the basic difference between what John Locke says as far as the government is concerned, or the governmental contract, or Thomas Hobbes' sovereign is concerned. Now let us very quickly evaluate John Locke's theory of social contract. So John Locke, unlike Hobbes, is in favor of constitutional monarchy, and he delegates limited power to the monarch, unlike Hobbes, and he gives the right to the people to revolt against the monarch, and revolt against the monarch if he is not up to the expectations of the people, and people enjoy most of the rights in the state of nature. So this is just the positive aspects of the social contract theory given by John Locke. But however it is not free from criticism. The theory that is propounded by Locke, critics say that Locke's state of nature, they describe it as unreal and unhistorical. So they describe it as unhistorical and unreal, and they say that history doesn't give us any example where the state of nature was where in the state of nature there was state of equality and freedom. So there is no such evidence. The critics criticize in this way about the social contract theory of John Locke, and further they say that according to Locke, the sovereignty is divisible, which means it is divided between the people and the ruler. But critics say that in reality it is not so, and the critics point out that Locke had tried to save the people from the tyranny of the ruler, but he has overlooked the fact that if people revolted against the state, no punishment would be given to them. So this means that one side the people has every right to revolt against the ruler, but what I mean, if he is not up to the expectations of the people. But what on the other hand, what if people, if the people revolted against the state, if they go against the state, for no, genuine reasons, then there was no authority, or there was no mechanism, to punish them. So this is about the John Locke theory. The social contract theory as given by John Locke. Thank you.